Kia ora koutou. Welcome everybody to this meeting of the Saxton Field Committee. I'll just call on Richard Kirby to karakia. Thank you.
Okay. E te atua, manakatia mai tēnei hui, arahina mai mātou kōrero, me au mātou whakarau, kia tuki atai mātou, a whai nei, ake, ameni.
Thank you. We have Councillor Campbell-Rollo zooming in, so that means we have a full muster of the committee, so there'll be no apologies. So we can move straight to public forum. So we've got 4 speakers today, so everybody will need to be sticking to their time frames, please, so that we can stick to a half-hour schedule. So first of all, we have Alcohol Health Watch, and Andrew Galloway is presenting on behalf of that organisation. Welcome, Andrew.
Kia ora koutou. It's really great to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee on the Saxton Field Reserve Management Plan. Andrew Galloway tōku ingoa, and I'm from Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland. I have very strong roots to Nelson and Tasman. My grandfather raised a family here. My father's retired here. My grandmother was a JP and marriage celebrant. So she both married and divorced many people in the region. I'm delighted to be here on behalf of Alcohol Health Watch. We're a small NGO trust. These are the subjects I'll cover today. Next. Didn't work for me. And a little bit about our organisation. So we're an independent national charity. We're funded by Health New Zealand Te Whatu Ora to reduce alcohol harm and inequities. Our functions by contract are to provide evidence-based information and advice on policy and planning matters, coordinating networks and projects to address alcohol harms such as alcohol-related injury, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and coordinating community action projects. That's my small team. We're very small. Like I say, I'm delighted that you've given me the opportunity to address the committee on this plan. I'll cover it quickly and hopefully leave time for questions, but international evidence around why alcohol and sport don't mix is clear. Sport as a mechanism for advertising increases the potency and harm of advertising by capitalising on the excitement of the game, increasing positive attitudes towards alcohol brands and the product in general. And it normalises alcohol as an ordinary commodity. That's the international evidence. I won't read it all. You've had this in the agenda, so you've had time to digest it. It's not just a youth issue, as Dr. Laura Joyce from Christchurch Hospital and an academic and Rose Crossan put out in the press last week, Friday. They've seen a rise in older New Zealanders attending Christchurch ED from 5 to 11% over the last 10 years. It's a big issue. Alcohol harm cost this country an estimated $7.85 billion, and that cost is rising. In the New Zealand evidence, we had a brilliant study from KidsCam, or called KidsCam from Otago University, which saw that Māori and Pacific are more likely, children are more likely to see or be exposed to alcohol advertising through sponsorship. And sponsorship is present in a third of all the advertising that children are exposed to. These are statistics, and I'm sure you don't need any schooling on this because this is a policy that this committee has been looking at for some years. There is really strong public support for the decision you made in 2020, and this public support has been consistent over the years. In 2023, the most recent, 58% of people in a poll supported banning alcohol sponsorship at sporting, community and other events that under 18s go to, and a further 22% where could go either way. You can read the rest of that support, but it has been consistently high. The other thing to point out is sports contribution, alcohol's contribution to sport is not as much as what the alcohol industry in particular would lead you to believe. A Sport New Zealand study last year found it was only 10 to 12 million, and that was roughly 5% of revenue. Yet it occupies such a powerful role in sport. And it's not just us saying it, it's not just a little NGO or the health agencies or the police or whoever else is saying alcohol advertising should be phased out. This was looked at most comprehensively by the Law Commission prior to its 2010 recommendations to government, and the Law Commission recommended it be phased out. The government didn't move on that, sadly, central government, and punted it over to the ministerial forum. I think by design, they were hoping for a different result. They put Graham Lowe in charge of a committee, but yeah, and also there was the chief exec of the Advertising Standards Authority on that committee. But that committee came back with the exact same recommendation, and it's since been picked up by the government inquiry into mental health and addiction, and previously there's been a position consistently by the DHBs and the Cancer Control Agency. You don't get that level of independent government commissioned inquiry making these recommendations if the evidence didn't stack up. So we think Nelson and Tasman were right originally. We love the vision that you had for Saxton Field, where regional community comes together to play sport and for recreation, and it's an inclusive environment for everyone. We love that. We think that was fantastic. We congratulate the committee. I wasn't part of Alcohol Health Watch, but I think if I had any regrets, we didn't celebrate that enough. I acknowledge the consultation that went into that, and I think the people that submitted on that would have been, those that were in favour would be disappointed with what's happened since, and also acknowledge the special role of iwi as kaitiaki. So really, why am I here? I'm here to say, can we negotiate? I don't know why alcohol holds such a powerful position over sport. And in my view, I would love to work with you and get Asahi and get New Zealand cricket around the table and see if there's a middle ground here. Asahi also have non-alcoholic product, the likes of Phoenix or Charlie's, a 0% Asahi product. They could have pouring rights, but no advertising, and we would love to make it work. We've seen local government make really good positive moves, and for example, Auckland Council banned alcohol advertising from transport, from public transport, and the industry didn't have such a stranglehold on that, and it's been maintained. I would love to see the ban that you've made based on solid evidence be maintained. I think local government is an opportunity to show central government that it can be done. I think there's plenty more advocacy that we and yourselves can do to government to further shore up what you've done here, and really my plea is to you to work with us and see if we can make what you've already got work. That's all I'll say, and welcome questions from councillors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for your presentation. Do any councillors have queries, anything they want clarified or additional information from Andrew? Tim?
Cheers, Andrew. The recent cricket game, the Bombers, if you hadn't attended, or let me know what did you think of the level of advertising at the recent cricket game, or the manner that it was?
I haven't been Councillor Skinner, but I did have reports from my colleagues down here, Te Whatu Ora, who did have someone present, and they said it was very minimal. So look, I think I appreciate the pragmatic role both councils have in this space, and I think if an exemption goes ahead, keeping it as low profile as possible is a good move. So I wasn't there in person.
Sorry, so and I think that so in the way it was seen or not seen that recent game, that would be in a good way ahead.
If you do have to have it, having less is more. If you know what I mean. Yep.
Thanks, Tim. Anybody else? Any questions? Can I ask you what, Andrew, have you or any of your colleagues had any discussions with New Zealand Cricket over any of the alcohol advertising sponsorship? We haven't. I wanted to talk to the council first. It's not my role to try and negotiate on behalf of these two councils, but I'd be very happy to. Okay, I appreciate that, mate. I just wondered whether you had tried to address it with anything at that level. So you wouldn't have any knowledge of how long sponsorship deals may be that New Zealand Cricket has? No.
No,
Probably-
I don't have that detail. We did work, so prior to working at Alcohol Health Watch, I worked at the Alcohol Advisory Council, and in about, I think, 2009 and 10, we had a partnership arrangement with New Zealand Cricket, and at that stage it was supporting their provision of mid-strength beer. I know New Zealand Cricket would be open to working with the social and health aspect organisations to try and do the best thing by communities, and I think it would be a worthwhile endeavour to talk to them.
Thank you for that. If there's no further questions, thank you very much for taking the time to make a presentation before and also to speak to it. So you and your colleagues, thank you very much. Next public forum is Hannah Wilkinson and Rachel Eyre and Jay Liz from National Public Health System. So please, if you come forward, that would be great. So welcome along. Thank you very much for making the time available today and coming along, sharing your thoughts.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. These are our role titles on the screen. Rachel and I work for the National Public Health Service, and Jay works for Nelson Bay's primary health organisation. We're all based at Richmond Health Hub on Queen Street, just down the road. So our presentation today will cover the commonalities that we have in health and Council has as leaders in community wellbeing. We'll cover the high experience of alcohol harm that our communities face locally and the health system face, and community and iwi voice, and how it is critical that they're involved in council decision making. And ultimately, we request that council carefully consider alcohol harms and community voice in making this decision and continue to show leadership in this space. So in this picture, you'll see a fence at the top of a cliff, and the fence represents where we in public health fit into the health system. So we aim to prevent, promote, protect health at an upstream level rather than being a treatment-based service at the bottom of the cliff, say like a hospital. Building and maintaining the fence requires us to work on the wider determinants of health. These are largely external factors that influence our lives every day. So how we live, work, play, and grow old. 80% of these sit outside the health system, and policies that councils have largely shaped these determinants of health locally. So policies that think about well-being, consider well-being and the impacts that the policy have on well-being, have the opportunity to protect our communities, such as this policy that is around alcohol advertising at Saxton Field. Within the National Public Health Service, our mandate for work is under the Pai Ora Healthy Futures Act, the Health Act, and Te Tiriti o Waitangi. All of these are aiming to improve health for all and ensure equity for our population. Similarly, councils are responsible for well-beings, so improving the environmental, economic, cultural and social well-being of our communities. So that means council also has a role in building and maintaining the fence at the top of the cliff. Regarding the four well-beings, we understand that often a careful balancing act is required to manage trade-offs across the four well-beings. A key question is who stands to gain least and who stands to gain most by any proposed changes. We support Alcohol Health Watch's view and the weight of evidence that Andrew has shared. And we could commend the courageous leadership Council took to include the policy to ban alcohol advertising in 2021. Courageous leadership like this is required if we want to see a reduction in alcohol harm in our communities. Most other sporting codes clearly don't have an issue with this ban. And as Andrew said, now only 5% of sports sponsorship is made up by alcohol. The social license for this is shrinking. We promote participation in community sport as a way for people to be active, healthy, and socially connected. But these benefits have the potential to be undone when sporting organisations partner with companies who profit from products and practices that are harmful to health and well-being, including alcohol.
So we're here to level the playing field, I guess, and shine a light on the health harms in particular. The products marketed and sold by the alcohol industry are making New Zealanders sick. Alcohol is a toxin. Oh, thank you. Sorry. Alcohol is a toxin, a psychoactive addictive drug, a class 1 carcinogen, and responsible for over 200 health conditions. Yet alcohol is most often glamorized and normalized through advertising. So in New Zealand, according to the New Zealand Health Survey, approximately 1 in 5 people, adults, are hazardous drinkers. Hazardous drinking is an established drinking pattern that carries a risk of harming the drinker's physical or mental health or having harmful social effects on the drinker or others. In Nelson, this is similar, and in Tasman, a little higher. So as a risk factor, alcohol is also the leading cause of health loss, and that's a composite measure of death and disability. It's the leading cause of health loss in 15 to 49-year-olds in New Zealand. That was from the latest health status report. And this is adults and young people in the prime of life. Shown locally, the disproportionate hazardous drinking by age groups, it shows that the younger age groups are the most likely to be have higher rates of hazardous drinking. Although, as Andrew pointed out, that's not to downplay the older age groups also being reasonably high, as the Christchurch ED study recently showed. In Nelson, the highest age group is 15 to 24-year-olds, and in Tasman, the slightly older, 25 to 44. Males are more likely to have a hazardous drinking pattern than females, and New Zealand European are higher than Māori, although nationally it's the other way around. But this is quite separate from the disproportionate exposure that Māori have, as for the children and the kids' cameras showed, have higher exposure to advertising and also bear disproportionate harms from with health outcomes. So when we talk about alcohol harms, it includes both harm to the drinker, but also harm to others. And a recent study in New Zealand showed that the harm to others outweighs the harm to the drinker. And that's often not really thought about, although it's, you know, in our media and the newspapers on a very regular basis. Harm to the fetus is actually the highest rated condition for harm to others. So that's the drinking in pregnancy. And there's no safe limit for amount of alcohol in pregnancy. In Nelson Marlborough, the alcohol-related hospital admissions are on the increase. They've been, it's a rising trend for the last 10 years. And Nelson is higher than the New Zealand average. And that includes both acute and chronic conditions. So things like injury and self-harm, but also things like liver disease, pancreatitis, and cancers. So I'm going to pass to Jay.
Yara Koto. I'm Jay Blazek, the youth alcohol and other drug clinician at Nelson-based Primary Health. I appreciate the opportunity to share what I see on the ground in our communities. I receive upwards of 200 referrals per year. And for the past 7 years, I've been working daily with young people as young as 12 years old to dispel their misunderstanding, confusion, and struggles with alcohol to make positive changes in their lives. Alcohol issues account for fully 50% of the people engaged at our local addiction service, more than all other drugs combined. Anyone who thinks that this is a relatively small or minor issue, as been suggested recently on national TV, is welcome to spend a day with me, listening to the misery and destruction alcohol is causing a significant number of our community members. 3/4 of New Zealanders who will struggle with a significant alcohol issue at some point in their lives will be well on their way by the time they're 20 years old, which is why it is so important for us adults to not provide misleading information. I spend a significant amount of time with young people untangling their misconceptions so that they can make informed decisions. I use sport and exercise as a significant component in supporting many of them to make positive changes, as it can be very effective. The benefits of positive adult leaders, socialization with peers, and teamwork often required, and the benefits of increased physical and mental health and self-confidence cannot be overstated. However, my work is complicated by the relentless pairing of these incredibly positive lifestyle choices with harmful products like alcohol. Please help to say enough is enough in terms of exposing the young people and families in our communities to misleading information and the resulting harms. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, you three, for your presentation. Any,
We had a couple more slides if there's.
Oh, sorry.
Please.
I thought you finished. No, go ahead.
So these are the evidence views of our stakeholders who you'll see on the bottom of the slide. These organisations support our presentation today. We're aware, obviously, that is going out to full public consultation. So I'm sure they may want to represent themselves, and others will want to as well. But these three key statements, I think, are the things that we wanted to get across, that children and other vulnerable people in our community should have the opportunity to live healthy lives and should be protected from harmful alcohol advertising. Alcohol and sport are an unhealthy mix, especially where young people are exposed, and adults and sports people are also affected. And the health of our Māori and Pacific communities are disproportionately impacted. And this is our final slide. So our recommendation to you, because ultimately this is a decision that sits with the joint councils, is that we recommend that councils adequately weigh the harms as well as the benefits, recognising that the harms and the benefits profits don't necessarily flow in the same direction. We recommend consulting with those most impacted and with iwi, and we understand that a full consultation will occur. Is there the possibility of a win-win, as Alcohol Health Watch has highlighted, and how can council continue to be a part of the solution rather than the problem? And how can council help to lead change and the position of others, for example, through Local Government New Zealand, as you've done through with LAPs? And we request that council carefully consider alcohol harms and community voice in making this decision, and continue to show the great leadership that you've done so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Any quick questions from councillors? Brett?
Thank you through the chair. Thank you for your presentation. Did the ministry, the medical officer of health report on this in terms of the special licence application? So did they fulfil section 141 4B, and was there an opposition or to the last game that occurred?
I'd have to refer to one of my licensing officers. I wasn't involved at all, I'm afraid.
I think they might be behind you.
I think they might be behind me. It was not opposed.
Okay, so is it likely to be opposed in the future, in terms of if it was changed and there was alcohol there? Because obviously there's a two-step. There's this reserve management plan,
Yes.
and then there's a process to get a license.
Yes.
So does the ministry have, or the medical officer of health have an opinion in terms of going forward about opposing licenses and using 4B under section 141 to do that?
I'd have to say we always consider exposure in all of the licenses, and whenever there's a family type event or where we think there's significant young people exposed, we will always consider the impacts on exposure, and we'll try to do everything we can to minimise.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Tim?
I think I asked a similar question I asked Andrew earlier. And let me know if you weren't aware or weren't at the game or didn't see the advertising. What was your thoughts on the way alcohol was advertised at the cricket game?
again, I wasn't there, but from colleagues and from others that I understood were at the game, I think that was relatively well managed, that the visibility was low.
And do you think it was, like you used the term, alcohol seems to be glamorized at sport? Do you think that was glamorized in the instances we've had
I
it
can't
here?
comment, sorry, unless my colleagues are aware. I can't comment on the specifics.
Okay, so in one sense, I'd say it reasonably important because there was a concern you had about alcohol being glamorized, but do you think it could end up being glamorized if we carry on with status quo? So we're just getting some nods.
I think you know, obviously you've got a range of options that are being put to you by council staff. I think this is something that, you know, has to go out to full consultation for full consideration. Yeah, it's a multi-layered. I mean, advertising is a multi-layered context that we're in here, you know, and it's a cumulative multi-layered thing. I think what we're trying to talk about here is in the broader picture. We would like to see everything that can be possibly done to minimize exposure and to reduce the normalization and glamorization of alcohol.
And through the chair, and thank you for your well-written presentation and document to read through. And you talk about consultational input in the decision making here by iwi, and you talk about Māori children have a higher exposure to alcohol than other children. Can you explain how that's, what you mean by that?
Well, that's being demonstrated in that study that Andrew spoke to in terms of the evidence around children wearing cameras. This was a study conducted in Wellington, where they wore cameras during the day, and all of the exposures that they had to advertising of alcohol, whether that be on the TV at home, whether that be through billboards in the streets or merchandise that was around with the advertising, they found that Māori children were 5 times more likely to be exposed than non-Māori, and 3 times more likely to be exposed to alcohol advertising was for Pacific children compared to non-Māori, non-Pacific.
Okay, just follow that. But again, I feel that could be the case in Nelson for sports.
Well, we don't have the benefit of having studies for every town in New Zealand. Right. So that's been extrapolated for, you know, wider New Zealand, but of course it's always going to have limitations because, yeah, places do vary, but that doesn't mean to say that it wouldn't be dissimilar because of all the other, as I say, it's multi-layered, multiple different ways that children are exposed.
And last question.
I think we're getting material that's probably more for the next stage, I think, than today, I think.
Okay, I was just sort of clear because part of that was sort of giving the reasonings why the way we should make the decision and who should be involved in the decision making. That was part of your presentation, was who should be involved in the presentation and why. One very last question through the chair, and having this decision made by elected officials here and involvement, you're saying with iwi part of the decision made, do you think that should also be fair if we have other groups, say Grey Power, could also be involved in that decision making, for example? There's
no reason why Grey Power couldn't. If part of your public consultation, it's up to anybody.
Or in regards to decision making, or in regards to the presentation, in regards to the decision making rather than the consultation, it was beyond the consultation. But you don't have to answer if you don't feel comfortable. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. In your resource management plan, it talks about iwi as kaitiaki of the Saxton Field. Yeah. So it was really in recognition of that.
And that's
what
we've done. Thank you. Cheers.
Campbell, can you hear me? Did you have any questions? I forgot to ask you last time.
Excuse me, good morning. I'm on mute so I don't cough too much. I'm more than happy the questions that I was focused on have already been asked by other councillors. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Sorry, do you have a final comment you want to make, Jay?
I would say it's rather significant in terms of iwi, due to the fact that what I see year on year is 4 times or 400% the population of my referrals are from Māori. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. As a former Golden Bay resident, I liked your image that you showed with the fence. I know exactly where that was taken. So, so thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
So the next speaker is Bruce Struthers, who's welcome, Bruce.
Thank you.
I understand you know the process. If we've got 5 minutes, hopefully we can have time for some questions within that as well. So thank you very much.
So please try not to be distracted by the presentation on the screen. But it's just going to make a point that I'm trying to get across. I'm Bruce Struthers. I apologize in advance for any opinions that may be seen by Mayor Smith as a bit over the top or a bit PC, but they're strongly held. I've worked in the information technology field since 1977. One of my first employers was Information International, which rendered the first realistic synthetic image of a teapot. It also made advertising films for a Brazilian cigarette company of flying cigarettes. We used mainframe computers to render a single frame in 24 hours. So the technology's changed since then. I subsequently worked for computer-aided design companies and Amazon.com in 1999 and Starbucks in 2007. I worked on data warehouses, which collected all transactions and all clickstream data from all customers and potential customers into decision supports reports on customer engagement. In other words, looking at whether media was actually working for the company. And as you know, Amazon has ads embedded everywhere in every page. So they're watching how you are engaging with their media and advertising. Asahi is a large, diverse, multinational company. My position is it does not need banners with logos on sports fields to present product impressions. Cricket matches draw stadium crowds in the tens of thousands. However, television broadcasts reach millions of sports fans and consumers, perhaps for a longer time because of the auxiliary media that's available on the web. The ICC Cricket Organization states that in the 2023 India versus Australia final, there were 59 million peak concurrent viewers for that one match. What's important to advertisers is to present product impressions, usually in the form of logos. To see how effective that is, ICC stated that in the last World Cup, host country India contributed to the staggering numbers of 422 billion viewing minutes on the Disney Star network alone, and Pakistan achieved unprecedented viewership with 237 billion viewing minutes of live content. Why that matters to you is that it's time that an image can be presented on a screen, a product image, with this sort of technology, which I have to give kudos. This is a Dunedin-based company that's doing this work. So as you'll see on the screen, any image, including product logos and targeted advertising, can be on a live broadcast anywhere on a screen, which is a lot more effective than an accidental view of one small logo on one piece of field tape in a screen while the game's going on. So I would think you would want to encourage Asahi to focus on this type of marketing and not on on-field marketing. So why is Asahi so adamant about using an outdated and rather quaint way of getting their message across? One, media advertising is expensive, especially on an international scale. Physical advertising is much cheaper and much more cost effective for them. Second, New Zealand cricket pretty much dropped the ball in signing up Asahi as a sponsor after you had made a very clear signal that your community's preference was to not have alcohol advertising on the fields. So New Zealand cricket's trying to regain the high ground and control the game as far as advertising presentation goes. And they've got a lot to make up for. Another example of them not paying attention to details is in the letter that they sent to you. They didn't even look up the names of the mayors to whom they were addressing that letter. They also had Powerade as a sponsor for non-alcoholic beverages. So they had to differentiate the sponsors' products that they presented. So third, and I think most importantly, alcohol advertising is not and has not been permitted in countries that have large Muslim populations. This includes India, which banned alcohol advertising in the year 2000, Pakistan in 1977, and Bangladesh recently in 2022. So my contention is that Asahi is trying to slip in alcohol product advertising in the broadcast of games and not violate the local countries and the participant countries' opinion on alcohol advertising. The staff report said that the reputation of Saxton Field might be damaged by a perceived inconsistency in policy on the part of Saxton Field on advertising. I would contend that the reputation of Saxton Field may actually improve by complying with the values of both team members and team home countries. So New Zealand cricket, I feel, offers a very weak case for the financial benefits to Nelson and Tasman for these matches. They said over 4,000 people attended the game without incident, talking to the men's match. And it is estimated that the 3 games contributed $2.5 million of economic benefit to the region. That's echoed in the report, which says that there was about that dollar figure. Again, pre-game, no follow-up post-game assessment of the economic benefit was performed. So you really don't know if you achieved what New Zealand Cricket and Asahi promised you in financial benefit. And I have sent an email with all of what I'm saying, with links, with pictures. But what's here is a picture of that men's match. And if you take a look at that, you'll see there's a lot of empty seats. So the on-field advertising is not reaching as many eyeballs as was anticipated. And clearly the financial benefits that were proposed were not achieved because you didn't have 6,000 full seats populated with out-of-town fans. So I'm asking you not to let New Zealand Cricket bully you, the 2 districts. New Zealand Cricket's problem with Asahi is their problem to solve. It's a business problem. And your ratepayers, who are facing significant rate increases today are not interested in saving a large multinational company money on advertising. Option one, presented by Planner Harrington on your staff, says, let's continue to go with the way we are, which is no alcohol advertising on the field. It has a risk of actually improving the relationship of the venue in the district and in the eyes of millions of cricket fans worldwide whose religion does not permit consumption of alcohol. So I propose a simple alternative policy to 4.8.23 to remove any uncertainty that any renter of the venue may have. No physical or electronic product advertising is permitted anywhere on any sports venue within Saxton Field at any time. This amendment would allow participants and spectators to focus on the enjoyment of the sport without external distraction. I contend that Saxton Field and the City of Nelson and Tasman District are not for sale. Now, with Three Waters, you have had to consider.
So, can you, your time is well and truly past, so can you just finish with one last sentence? Thank you.
If these venues are for sale, then I ask that you charge the renters a market price reflecting the true value of the advertising to the advertisers.
Thank you very much. I don't think we have time for any questions, but thank you for your presentation. And as you're aware, there will be a process that we're going through and an opportunity for making further submissions down the track.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Neville Mayo has requested to speak as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to come in at very late notice. I've been told I must be brief. Unfortunately, I haven't got a PowerPoint presentation, having only learnt about this meeting yesterday, early yesterday. So thank you for allowing me to take time. I'm really here, I guess, to represent the voice of sport today. Just to give you my background, I had 10 years as the Chief Executive of Sport Tasman. Had a major role to play in the development of Saxton Field, was on the Saxton Field Development Committee, chaired the committee that established the new stadium, the Saxton Stadium. So you can see that in my time as CEO of the Sports Trust, totally immersed in issues for the good of sport in Nelson. Today, I thought rather than get into the argument of the good and the bad in terms of alcohol advertising, I thought I'd just go quickly through some of the two aspects, the history of the sale of liquor and the provisions within it in terms of advertising sale of liquor at sports events. Very brief summary of that. And also a little bit more about Saxton Oval, what's happened at Saxton Oval, number of games, estimates of the economic benefits, average attendances of audiences, that sort of stuff I thought might be helpful to you guys. A bit more background rather than talking about the pros and cons of advertising at this event. Of course, I mean, I sit here and thinking about, we're talking primarily about Saxton Field here. What about Trafalgar Park? I mean, what is going to be the outcome in terms of alcohol advertising at Trafalgar Park? That obviously is another story that might need to be debated at some time. So let me just quickly go through this brief history of what's happened in terms of alcohol being sold at sports events. Well, up until 2021, the sale of liquor at public places was allowed in terms of the Sale of Liquor Act of 2012. Very strict. I've had to manage this myself in terms of the 3 international games that I was involved with. There was a permit required, first of all, for it. The outlets had to have a bar manager standing in there, supervising staff serving the drinks. And of course, police supervision at those events was very heavy. We had, I can remember at most of the events, at least half a dozen or more police staff there, just keeping an eye on the behaviour, the sale of the liquor, how it all transpired. So that was the control of it prior to 2021. In 2013, there was a major study undertaken by Massey University on the general theme of alcohol consummation at sports events. Ran to 48 pages. A number of recommendations came out of that report. The main findings in it, interestingly enough, was that in terms of alcohol consummation at sports events, rugby and tennis was where the highest consuming levels took place. Funnily enough, back in that day, 2013, and their survey went back some years from there, consumption at cricket was relatively low levels in comparison to what was happening with rugby and tennis. 2014 to 2021, the Sale of Liquor Act applied. And of course, as a result of the Massey University study, massive study, a number of things were going on behind the scenes, discussion with government about, where to from here based on what the Massey University survey had to say. At that time, Sport and Recreation New Zealand, who was our controlling body in Wellington, also undertook a study of national sports organisations. I was asked to provide a comment for that, which I did. I provided a 3-page report in terms of how I saw it from the Nelson point of view. And then, of course, as you all know, I think you all know now that in 2021, the Advertising Standards Authority rules were introduced. I'll emphasise, if you already don't know, that Rules 3A provide that 80% of the people attending a sports event where there is alcohol advertising must be adults. And that was 3A. 3B of the rules introduced said that the alcohol advertising emphasis must be subordinate in manner. In other words, it wasn't to be the prime focus of advertising at those sports events. I have had an opportunity since the issue came up, which I commented on to councillors back in October last year, where obviously this debate was going on prior to the beginning of the cricket season, where we knew we had 3 international games here, and this had to be an issue that had to be resolved. And thankfully, it was resolved, and the games were able to go ahead without too many problems occurring. At that time, I had an opportunity to talk to New Zealand Cricket. Rang them personally and said, what is the issue in terms of how you see this going forward? They did say that they were wanting to see much more promotion on low and non-alcohol products at games, both beer and wine. They also said that from what they understood, that the Advertising Standards Authority rules were working well in other venues around New Zealand. It wasn't something that they saw as a major issue that they were grappling with at the time that it became an issue here in Nelson. That's all I wanted to say in terms of how the legislation and regulations applied to sale of alcohol products at sports events. Just going now down a different path altogether in terms of why I'm here, to make sure that the interests of sports are promoted, and the fact that we want to see more international sports, not just at Saxtons or Trafalgar, but anywhere in our district. We'd like to see more international sports take place. As far as the Saxton Field development was concerned, the councils jointly put in 50 million for that. Also included transferring the rugby and cricket facilities away from Trafalgar Park. The big reason for that is New Zealand Cricket said the rectangular shape of Trafalgar Park is not suitable for international cricket, and therefore an oval had to be contemplated, and of course Saxton Oval resulted from that. So 50 million was spent by the councils putting that together, plus another 12 million on the Saxton Field Stadium. Looking at what's happened since then, I can give you the following stats, which I thought you'd be interested in. The Saxton Oval and the Pavilion were first opened in 2009. The first games they were played in 2010 and 2014. Since that time, there have been 15 one-day internationals played there and 10, including the last 3 this summer, of T20 games. According to the Nelson Regional Development Agency, in terms of the one-day fixtures, the financial benefits for the 14 games have been averaged out at 2.5 million per game. There was one game, of course, with had a very low attendance in terms of the capacity of the ground. They estimate that was probably around about 500,000 economic benefit to the region as a whole. You look at one-day stats, that's $35.5 million of benefit economically. The average attendance over those one-day games was estimated to be about 6,000 people, especially the men's games. They got the big numbers. The women's games got smaller attendances. As far as T20 matches concerned, I've said 10 of those took place. There were 5 games played that they thought about a $2.5 million benefit to the region, and 5 games at about $500,000 of financial benefit, which altogether is about $13 million benefit from the T20 matches held here. So there you had the summary of it all. The one day is about 35.5 million, and the T20 games 13 million.
Neville, you're well over your time, so can you just draw your presentation?
Just one final summary, Mr. Chair. Talk about the sponsorship issues. The committee should know that New Zealand Cricket has 19 sponsors. Asahi is the beverage alcohol content product sponsor. They have 19 other sponsors that cover a wide variety of different products and support for sport at schools, etc. And all of those sponsors get the opportunity of revolving signage at sports events. It's not a situation where Asahi dominates totally with its promotion of its products at international sports events. They, alongside 18 other sponsors, do have the opportunity of having their sponsorship advertising by revolving signage at the venue. That's all I need to say. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Neville. There'll be another opportunity for submissions if we proceed with what's proposed in the meetings today. So thank you. Okay, thanks very much for all those who've come along to the public forum and used the opportunity. We'll now continue on the agenda. So declarations of interest. Brent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm comfortable to go through this process, but as I've advised, I'll be stepping back from the hearing panel for this in my role as District Licensing Chair for Tasman. So I believe that Councillor Ostoy is also going to speak, but Councillor Dowler and Dakey will be our nominated representatives to replace us.
Thank you for that. Joe, you wanted to add your comment as well to that?
No, I was just trying to say to him, just include me in that. Thank you.
I will declare that I'm also a panel member of the Nelson District Licensing Committee, which means occasionally I get involved in a hearing, but if anything related to Saxton Field, I would not be available for such a hearing. So just declare that in case any confusion on that. Campbell, you don't have anything to clear?
No, all good this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, keep forgetting, got to have this on. No late items, so we'll do the minutes from the last meeting.
Happy to move that they're true.
Okay, seconder, Brent, any discussion? If not, I'll put it. All those in support say yes. Against?
Yes.
Carried. Thank you. Let's go to item 7, reports. So the main item for the meeting today, and we have Paul who's going to speak to us. So
Kia ora koutou. Just take a minute to acknowledge our public. I think it's fantastic that they've come along and shows a really incredible interest from the community. This has been an interesting report to pull together, and I've tried to do it with a really open mind and worked through it in a really scientific way. And I guess the proposed amendments that we've got in attachment 3 have evolved over time as I've worked through that. And following on from what we've heard this morning, I think we need to acknowledge that certainly there is an issue with alcohol in New Zealand and the advertising. And in my view, the New Zealand government has been slow to act on the evidence and advice that's been put in front of it, including the report that was referred to by Andrew way back in 2010. So that puts councils in a slightly difficult position. And in that context, I'm really proud of where our reserve management plan stands as it is at the moment. And I think it shows real leadership in the community, to be honest. The reality is, though, that the New Zealand cricket does have contractual arrangements in place, and if international cricket is to happen in Nelson, to be played here, then those obligations need to be fulfilled. And I think that we can agree that was fairly well tested last year. There were some real attempts to try and move New Zealand cricket on that through Central District Cricket, who put the bids in, and it wasn't achievable. Although there were some other changes made through that process, including there were no activations at the games, and there were no promotions on field and that sort of thing. And the advertising did have a relatively low profile, as mentioned. It's rotated. The digital signage is rotated amongst a whole lot of other brands. And in part of my recommendation, there is a sign-off requirement by the chair of this committee and the 2 chief executives. So through that process, there could also be further negotiation around what actually happens on the ground. We also need to respect that the reserve management plan policy was developed perhaps without the full consideration of the impact it might have on existing arrangements or arrangements that were being negotiated. Maybe we can learn from that. I'm not sure whether New Zealand cricket dropped the ball. I wasn't party to any of that, but at the end of the day, when a new plan like this is produced, it inevitably does need some tweaks and adjustments a couple of years down the line, and in many ways, that's what we have in front of us today. So, for me, in my view, changing the policy to allow any alcohol advertising is a big deal, and my recommendation is that we just open the door a crack. And signal that we want it closed again in future. So my recommendation, which is on the last page of the agenda, it just seeks a balance between the impact of a few international games with alcohol advertising a year and the potential impacts on community wellbeing that brings, and the opportunity that those games bring through other forms of wellbeing. So that might be social, might be economic. I guess also the inspiration that brings kids who go to the games and want to be more physically active. That's not a perfect solution. I'm not entirely comfortable with any alcohol advertising in sport, but I am comfortable with where the policy as it's recommended sits in the current New Zealand context. The exception for international cricket is balanced by introductory text in the policy that and expectations that acknowledge the issue and signal that all alcohol advertising should be phased out in the future. And as mentioned, that also requires the approval of the chair and chief executives. So in preparing this report, I've looked at what demand might exist elsewhere for advertising alcohol at Saxton Field. I've spoken with hockey, football, basketball, netball, Sport Tasman, and also council's events team. And unfortunately, Amy just had to leave, but that's our major projects manager, major events project manager. But I have spoken to her and have some information on those events if needed. And I found that cricket appears to be a bit of an anomaly. So I'm therefore of the view that opening up wider than cricket's not appropriate for the plan and could actually present a risk. If this necessity does arise in future, like if there is an event, say in 5 years, that desperately has to have alcohol advertising, in my view, that should be an exception process rather than provided for on the plan. And I'm also comfortable from my conversations with cricket that it can be limited to internationals. I've also recommended clarifying that it doesn't apply to players' clothing, because I really don't think that's appropriate for a reserve management plan to try and control. And I can really see that becoming an issue in future. We just can't can't envisage what teams from around the world might come to play what sport at Saxton Field. I don't have anything further to update in terms of the iwi engagement I've been undertaking. I did get to speak to them, didn't unfortunately get to speak to them at the Te Tau Ohu Hui on the 10th of April. The agenda was overrun, but my conversations continue. I've heard back from one, and I guess we'll continue to follow up, and I'll be able to incorporate any further feedback and advice in the deliberations report in June. So in terms of process, typically a reserve management plan development needs a two-step process under the Reserves Act, where we go out for written suggestions first prior to drafting. For this particular matter, I'm recommending the committee determines that these written suggestions wouldn't materially assist in the drafting. I think that would be more relevant if you're doing a whole plan or a full review or great swathes of the plan. And I'm also recommending that the committee determines that the amendments are not a comprehensive review of the reserve management plan. So there's two recommendations there. And that means that the process for engagement can be determined under the Local Government Act, just based on significance, and it's not a formal Reserves Act or special consultative procedure process. The public engagement proposed is considered commensurate with the amendments, which is 3 weeks, and a feedback period and opportunity to be heard. We also have some procedural amendments that we'll need to work through around the makeup of the panel and the timing, but we can tidy that up. I think it's up on the screen there as we get to the recommendations. So I'm really happy to take any questions. That will do from me.
Just invite Andrew White, who's the Group Manager, Community Service in Nelson City, to speak briefly to some thoughts he has.
Thanks, Chair Shaw. I'd just like to propose there may be another consideration the committee may want to consider. So if I refer you to clause 4.8.2.4 of the proposed change to the management plan, that clause that it is currently written is specific to international cricket events. The committee could also consider consulting on international events and significant national events. The reason I put that on the table as a possibility is that there is a possibility that other events may come up in the future that may have sponsorship deals in place with alcohol beverage suppliers that the councils would need to consider at the time. So that's really a call for the committee. As Mr. Harrington has said in his report, he's done some pretty extensive discussions with different sports codes involved in Saxton Field, and none of those sports codes have alcohol sponsors. So I'm happy to leave it at that, but happy to take any questions as well.
So I thought for a start, to take any questions that are on the body of the report as opposed to the recommendations. So if anyone's got any questions of Paul and maybe Andrew later, just on anything that was in Paul's report. So any questions on that from any of the committee members? We'll come to the recommendations later and maybe just work through those in order. So question?
Yeah, just in number 2 determines that written suggestions on the proposed amendments. Not on the report, though he was presenting this as part of.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to deal with the background stuff, so to speak, first, and then move to the recommendations. Just rather than kind of jump back and forwards if there's questions on both. But if there, anybody else have a question on the body of the report? Campbell, do you have a question on anything in the body of the report as opposed to the recommendations?
Just a question for you, Chair Shaw. Paul, thanks for the report. It's very very well written and good there. In terms of the timing, if we're to go out and consultate on updating the reserve management plan, what sort of timing are we going to have in terms of if there's bids been put in for further games of cricket, are we going to have time to consult, or is that still going to be a secondary recommendation that will come back before the council?
Through the chair, just to clarify, are you referring to say that the games that might occur in the coming summer in relation to this process?
Yeah, correct.
So I can only go off what central districts have told me, and that's that those conversations are well advanced as to allocations of games around the country. But he had a level of confidence that providing this process was well underway, and there was genuine intent and progress being made, that shouldn't be too much of a problem. However, we don't even, this is a change for a reserve management plan for 10 years, for example, the life of the plan. We don't even know if we're going to get allocated a game this summer. So that's kind of that's the only answer I can give, really. If we were allocated a game and progress is being made, there's no guarantees, but he felt comfortable that that progress being showed would be sufficient.
I guess a further sup on that through the chair is at obviously at a staffing level, you guys are well busy and the workload you already have. We're not going out rushing this plan in the hope that cricket comes back. We're simply, if cricket come back, we'll have this plan underway, but we're not going out rushing it for the hope that we get cricket back next summer.
I think this process has been fast, and I think there has been pressure to move it, but that hasn't compromised the quality of the recommendations.
I'm all good there, thanks, committee.
You have a question?
Yes, thank you, Paul. And just clarify, I've gotten 5.26 in regards to, quite rightly, iwi have been approached, feedback, and would I be right in saying feedback so far by iwi is in support of the processed approach?
Through the chair, well, we've approached all 8 iwi, and I've heard back from one who was in support of the proposed approach, but
the rest are supportive.
Yeah, well, I haven't heard back from the rest. I've only had it a few weeks, so this has been with me a few weeks as well. So it's been a pretty fast process. So I haven't really, in all honesty, given iwi sufficient time yet. But I think that by the time June comes around, we'll have a good, clear picture.
And they've been supportive in the past in regards to
I can't comment other than looking through the feedback from the development of the 2021 Reserve Management Plan when iwi were engaged in 2019 for that process. So there's a good 2-year working with iwi. This particular issue didn't come up through those conversations. That's the only thing I can report back on.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no further comments on the general report, we can move to the recommendation. So just maybe any queries or comments on first point? Anybody?
We're going to go one by one.
Yeah, we'll do them one at a time, I think. So the first recommendation is basically we're just receiving that. Yep. Second one, Tim, you still have a question on that?
Can you please explain what's meaning of that in regards to suggestions, proposed amendments? This will not materially assist in preparation. What does that mean?
So Section 41(5)(a) of the Reserves Act says the normal process, so nothing in the normal process shall apply in a case where the administrative body has by resolution determined that written suggestions on proposed plan would not materially assist in its preparation. So because the amendments are quite narrow in focus and scope, I'm recommending that I don't think it's worth that additional step of what you would have to do is councils would have to notify the intention to change the plan, invite suggestions, and then incorporate those suggestions into this recommendation. So my recommendation is that that's not required in this case.
Yeah, thank you.
As you recall, that was the process we used for the plan last term when we did that. We called for general comments first before we drafted.
Correct. So we're saying basically more sort of verbal presentation on that consultation period.
But we're cutting out that earlier stage.
It's a 2-stage process. So we're still going to notify these proposed amendments and invite feedback from from the public and for 3 weeks and then have a hearing. So it's not a very formal process. It's just an additional step at the start that you would do if, like, for example, when we do the Tahuna Reserve Management Plan, we will be doing that step, obviously.
Campbell, do you have any questions on point 2 and the recommendations?
No, all good, thank you.
Further questions on that? Point 3? Follows from point 2, really. No questions on that? Okay, point 4. So this is
So that, yeah, that's good.
so this is where we need to consider the comments that, well, the slightly alternative view that Andrew has advanced versus this. So I imagine there might be some discussion on this, whether we broaden it beyond cricket or just keep it to cricket. So any thoughts on this?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Based on Paul's report, I'm uncomfortable with the amendment to this because it shifts quite a lot from the consultation with the codes, the potential need. There's still a process to come back as we have now to do that. This does open it up wider than the original intent. If it was the majority view of the committee to have that in, then I'd ask that there at least be 2 choices of that clause, the original and that one. So it was really obvious once consultation happens, but I'm less comfortable with that clause.
Thank you. Any others views, Tim or Joe? Tim?
Yeah, I'm supportive of that clause. I'm more comfortable with that clause in the sense that if there is another event, it saves us going for a process of coming back to councils. It gives it empowerment for that decision to be made on an operational basis. But I mean, cricket's great here, but as you know, we're also open to very many other sports and cultural events on a national and international basis for the community and economic gain for Nelson. So I think broadening it would be good.
Okay. Yes.
I'm actually in agreement with my colleague, Councillor Maru.
Okay. Campbell, do you have a view on this particular point 4?
Yeah, I'm the same as Councillor Maru in the comment he made.
Thank you. And my personal view is that I think we should stick to just to cricket. I can't see that there's really going to be the opportunity for sporting events that will draw large crowds. We just don't have the spectator capacity for most of the other, in fact, all the other sports venues we have at Saxton Field. So I think we can probably deal with any others on a case-by-case basis. Or I think at this stage I'd prefer to stick to just the cricket issue. It is the main spectator stadium. Even though we have a banquet around the athletics track, we don't have big meets, and it's not envisaged that we would have big international meets where we'd probably have sponsors or possibly have sponsors, including alcohol sponsors. So I can't see that the stadium is big enough for that. That's where our stadium for major indoor events is Trafalgar Centre. So I can't see it kind of happening in that either with numbers that would warrant having major sponsors like that. If it happened, then they could be considered on a case-by-case basis. There's always an exemption provision. So that looks like there's a majority who favour keeping the original 4. Let's move to point 5. So rather than try and put dates into the resolution, because there's a few issues I'm away for some of the time, so we need to try and accommodate, and also the 2 councillors that are going to replace Councillor Maru and Alice. There will need to be discussions with them for what dates they're available, but the idea is that we try and get through this process in a fairly timely manner, as quick as we can, and our target is to present a recommendation to the joint council meetings on the 9th of July, isn't it? 9th of July is, that's probably the earliest we can do it, I think, in terms of the joint meeting to receive any recommendations from the hearings committee. So is everybody comfortable with 5?
Just through you, do you want to include 3-week consultation period followed by a hearing if is required, or do you don't put that in? Okay.
Just to set that out a bit more clearly, that is that easy enough to type in? Yeah.
It's not actually required.
Yeah.
I think the Act sets that down anyway, doesn't it? I guess anything they would add beyond the 3-week consultations. I mean, we've got to deliberate on them anyway. Yeah. Okay. All right. So generally comfortable with 5? You're okay with 5 as it is, Campbell?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay. 6? We will advertise it. You're already comfortable with that? It's pretty standard, as I understand it. Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So as part of that poll, will it go back out into the iwi Chair's portal or the portal, so iwi will have an opportunity to see this again? Yeah.
7? Comfortable with that, or anyone want to propose an alternative? I won't be the chair of this committee forever. My term finishes, so at the end of this triennium. But it's really just to tweak the kind of wording, I guess, if it's necessary. Everybody's comfortable with that? 8? So there's a bit of a change from what was circulated earlier, was explained earlier. So the 2 TDC councillors on the committee will be replaced by Councillor Daiki and Dowler. And I don't know the process of which they volunteered or whatever, but anyway, we don't need to know. So.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So just so I can speak for clarity, it's really rare. We're in a rare sense where both the chair and the deputy chair of the Tasman District Licensing Committee just happen to also be Saxton Field members. It's not like we don't want to be part of this decision, but it's hard to go either way. The perceived outcome of whatever this is when we sit and hear other ones in Tasman. And unlike our Nelson colleagues, we're having a run of hearings at the moment, or potential hearings. So it's not through disinterest, and it's not from having a desire to be part of it. It's just in terms of both our agency partners and our wider community people in terms of wider harm from alcohol. We just need to be seen as absolutely transparent.
I totally concur with that. I think you've been very careful with perceived conflicts as quite an issue that people have to grapple with. So,
and if it was only one of us, it wouldn't be a problem because I would step back. But the fact that
that's right, your deputy chairs can't take it over. That's right. So if you've got both chair and deputy ruled out, then yeah, I totally appreciate that and understand that. So everybody's comfortable with 8? Does that include you, Campbell?
More than happy, thank you.
Okay. And 0.9? It's just part of our current process anyway, that we have that. So we need to make sure that we've got one from each council in that quorum. All right. Yeah, so everyone's comfortable. Somebody prepared to move, have a seconder, move Councillor Maru and seconder Councillor Ellis. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Any consequential queries come up? We'll certainly work on the time frame for people, so we'll be in touch, Tim, over that and with the others. Grant?
Just through the chair, I'd like to thank Paul for the time he put into this report and the opportunity Tasman staff had to comment on it.
I totally concur with your comments too. He has put a lot of work into this. I've had several discussions with him in the process of this too. So I'd certainly extend my thanks to Paul for all the hard work he's done on this. A lot of consultation on getting to this stage with recommendations. So thanks, Paul. The job well done. No further business I'm not aware of. So, Richard, you like to?
Okay. Kia hiki ti kōrero, kia wātia ki mama ti manawa o te tangata, kia uki ti ara mō te mātātou ōrero nei, ko ronga ki runga kia tīna huie tākie.
I'll formally declare the meeting closed, and thank you very much again for those who came along and participated in public forum and just sat in the public gallery. Thank you for your interest.